everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of PCOA Voices. If you missed episodes 1 or 2, you can catch them on PCOA's website at pcoa.org or on our Facebook page. I'm your host, Lisa Reams. I serve as the Vice President for Programs and Services at PIMA Council on Aging. Welcome to my living room or my remote workspace, depending on the time of day. It's lovely to have you join me here. The purpose of PCOA Voices is to inform you, engage you, and hopefully we have some fun along the way. If you're new to PCOA, PIMA Council on Aging, we're your local nonprofit organization that coordinates services for older adults throughout Pima County and also provides services for their loved ones and their family caregivers. And if you're watching our broadcast live on either Vimeo or on Facebook Live, you can chat with us if you'd like to. We have staff here that can answer your questions, and they'd love to just be able to say hi to you as well. So in order to do that, all you would do is type your comment into the chat screen and just push enter. So during this time when so many people are self-isolating to protect their health, especially older adults and people with chronic health conditions, one of our big challenges that we keep hearing about is how to stay connected and engaged with others. PCOA and many other organizations have introduced virtual classes and experiences, and even this show, PCOA Voices, is designed to help provide some of that connection with each other. But many of these opportunities are only available to folks who have the access to technology to participate. What about the folks who don't have a computer or internet access or even a smartphone? How do they stay connected with other folks? How do they stay actively engaged? Well, in trying to answer that question, I decided to invite some of my wonderful, knowledgeable PCOA colleagues to weigh in on some of those questions. So I'd like to introduce you to Deb, Suzette, and Rebecca. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be here, Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi.
So just to introduce you all just a little, Deb Seng is a family caregiver support specialist. Suzette Gonzalez is the coordinator of our senior companion program, and Rebecca McGee is the vice president for a department we call Population Health Initiatives. So thank you all for joining us, having this important conversation. Rebecca, I want to start with you for a minute. What do you think is important for people to understand about what we mean when we talk about connectedness?
Sure. So I think for me, what really struck me about being connected was how disconnected I felt when life started changing around us. And I guess I didn't necessarily anticipate that. I realized that a lot of my connectedness really came from day-to-day interaction that wasn't happening intentionally, but it was just going on around me as I went about my day. And so as I started working from home, I really felt that feeling of disconnected, and I had to be much more intentional about being connected with people. And I hadn't necessarily thought about that before. I think when we talk about being connected or disconnected, we've talked a lot about being socially isolated to protect ourselves. And understanding that can really lead to that feeling of disconnectedness or loneliness. Not to say that if you live by yourself, that you are lonely. I mean, I feel like loneliness can happen in a room full of people. But I didn't necessarily think about how that would impact me when I started feeling disconnected. And in the work that we do, understanding that disconnectedness or loneliness can really have the same physical impacts as obesity, heart disease, smoking, that was not something I ever really thought of. And I don't know that many of us do when we think about loneliness. So for me, it was being purposeful in finding connectedness. Even if it was getting up every day and going out and checking the mail, something simple. It doesn't have to be like, the great purpose of life so that it's daunting. It can be something really small that gives us purpose, or making sure you text one person a day. I've tried to keep a list of folks that I'm keeping in touch with so that maybe I can help other people feel connected too.
Thanks for sharing that. Those are really good points. And I think it's important for those of us that live alone, like me, and are used to having some more social interaction, to really realize that being physically isolated or staying physically distant doesn't have to mean that you have to be socially isolated. When you and I were talking recently, you had told me a story about some things going on in your neighborhood about reaching out to others. Can you share that story with everyone?
Sure. And I think it also highlights that connectedness isn't just for adults. I saw on social media there was a group of kids in our neighborhood who they've been home for a really long time and they were kind of running out of things to do. And so they wanted to get in touch and meet their neighbors. They didn't really know how to do that. And they had raised all this money doing chores. So they went and they bought a ton of little goodies and they made goodie baskets. And every week they go and do this and they make a new set of baskets and they leave it on random doors in the neighborhood so that they can meet their neighbors. And included in the basket is a little note about who they are and why they're doing it. And if they'd like to, if the recipient would like to play a game or have a meal like on a deck where there's still social distancing, or just talk to someone, it leaves their contact information. And then they take a picture. The kids are very excited. They get their picture taken with the basket by the door and that's posted on social media. So maybe the person will see it and know they have a basket waiting at their door. And now other kids have wanted to do it too. So I think it's just a really nice way to get to meet your neighbors. When, at least for me, it was something that I had gotten out of the practice of doing, I think with the busyness of life. So meeting your neighbors is a really good idea. And kids starting it, I think that was a pretty great idea.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. That gives me ideas for things I want to do in my own neighborhood now. That's really a great idea. Deb, I know you've done a lot of work in this area. Can you help me understand what we need to know about how connection works and why it's important? And also, what advice and information would you give to someone who was concerned about an older family member or maybe an older neighbor who was feeling isolated or disengaged?
Absolutely. So just like Rebecca described, we know that isolation and loneliness can actually contribute to a number of both physical and emotional health issues and concerns. And one of the things that I think we may have a tendency to lose track of as we're all trying to get up with the latest technology is that connection really can be very simple. And in fact, it's in simple connection that the greatest value and meaning is often experienced. But it also means that we need to open up those creative parts of our brain in ways that we haven't thought of for a long time in some cases. What I mean by that is this. We know that based on brain research, that memories are stored in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. And what really makes a difference in getting those memories into or encoded into the brain is ensuring that they come with one or more of our five senses. And so certainly that's our ability to smell, to see, to hear, to touch, and to taste things. And what's really fascinating is we often think about vision as being the means by which we have most of our sense experience. And that's true, but it's also the least memorable. So what we can do is actually focus on the other four senses, and specifically the most significant being that of smell and of taste. And obviously those two are together. Smelling and tasting are those things that go most immediately into the hippocampus. And so whether someone lives alone and they're trying to create a sense of connectedness and remembering connection for themselves, or whether they're in relationship with folks, really drawing on that taste and that smell is super important. And so really thinking about positive memories where the family was together, whether it's the smell of a chocolate cake baking in the oven, or a favorite meal that was shared together as part of a family, or even the scent of vanilla, or heaven forbid, pumpkin spice. We're coming up on that time of the year and not too long. Those are ways to remember what connection was like. And once we open up those memories, it actually fuels us forward toward being connected with people in the here and now. And there are simple ways that we can do that. Perhaps you have a loved one, for example, who's living alone and we're not able to visit them now because of the fears of COVID. And it might mean as a family coming together and putting together small photo albums that we send through the mail and then talking about them by phone. It might mean doing get to know your family members, and maybe even in a mysterious kind of way, putting together mementos or favorite sayings or values or memories and having family members guess by phone about who that person is. So really the opportunities are limitless, but it is really about finding those simple and sensory ways to draw on connections from the past and to create those connections now.
I have the smell of chocolate cake going through my head now. So thank you for sharing that. You know, Deb, you and I have known each other for a lot of years. And I always appreciate the insights and wisdom and perspectives that you have to share. I also know that your career has taken some neat turns along the way. Would you be interested in sharing a little bit about your path and how you ended up joining us at Pima Council on Aging?
Sure, I'd be happy to. You know, ever since I was a small child, I have had a tremendous love for people. And that love propels me to really learn and understand what makes people unique. And that means really relishing some of the differences that we all bring to the table. And what grew from that was a real passion about helping people to discover how that they can live the best life right here and right now, regardless of obstacles or limitations or distractions even. And so my work has been really kind of broad, everything from providing therapy to folks to overseeing therapists in a clinical setting to building programs and doing corporate training. But I think there are two work experiences that really mean a lot to me, especially in the work that I do here at PCOA. The first one is that for a year I volunteered on the Navajo Nation, and I had the opportunity to work as a liaison between the indigenous folks and those volunteers that would come from around the country and at times from around the world, and really build a bridge of understanding between the cultures and the languages and the people. The other one was several years ago, I had opportunity to oversee a volunteer program of seniors and really learned that purpose and connection and creating a legacy makes all the difference in the world. And in many ways, that's what makes life meaningful and rich. And so I love what I'm able to do here at PCOA, to work as a bridge, to really understand the uniquenesses that people have and the challenges that they face, and to tailor opportunities and resources to each one of them.
That's awesome, Deb. We're so glad you're here. We're really lucky to have you. And that last story you shared actually leads me perfectly into asking Suzette a couple of questions. Suzette, I know that you and your senior companions recently spent a couple of days to bring some joy and friendship and connectedness to some pretty isolated folks in our community. Can you tell us all a little bit about the Senior Companion Program and about this project that you just did?
Yes, so I'll start by telling you a little bit about the Senior Companion Program. So it's a federally funded program where older adults volunteer to help reduce isolation for homebound adults. So they provide companionship by having friendly visits, taking folks out for a meal. Sometimes they provide respite for family caregivers. So that home visit is an essential part of the volunteer service that they provide. And with the current situation, we have not been able to do any home visits since mid-March. So as a way of keeping that connection going, we came up with the idea of doing a parade. So following all of the precautions, you know, and in keeping with social distancing, everybody rode their own vehicle. They decorated their vehicles for 4th of July. And then we had a parade, and we, you know, would drive in front of the person's home and wave. And sometimes we made a few loops, and it was a very joyous event for everybody that was involved. We didn't just have the volunteers, we also had some staff members from our community partners join us. So it was a very fun event. We hope to do it again in the future. And, you know, it gave everybody the opportunity to do this at home on their own. They were able to, you know, keep that distance. They had the comfort of the AC in their vehicle to help beat the heat. And so it just seemed very natural to do that. This is also something that folks can do at home, either in their neighborhood. They can have a parade. They can do it with family members if somebody's having a birthday or a graduation, which is where the idea came from. You can just decorate your vehicles and do a little bit of a parade, and it's a great way to to celebrate somebody that you care about. The other thing they've been doing is, before that, was just staying in touch through phone calls, cards, letter writing, but they were really missing that face-to-face aspect. So that's where the parade came in.
Well, that's a really great idea. I was speaking just this morning with someone who joined you on that parade, and she said it was so much fun that she decided she wants to decorate her car every 4th of July and drive around. So that says a lot for the importance of participating in things like that. One of the things that's always struck me about you, Suzette, is all the passion that you have for the work that you do and for the senior companions. What is it that you find so inspiring about working with that group?
What I love about the program and just working with older adults in general is the diversity in their backgrounds, all the experience that they bring and the creativity. And so with us being unable to do what the program is known for, which is the home visits, it really opened the door for us to just use our imaginations and think outside the box. And the parade, although it's been done, it was unique in the way we did it and the way we used it to keep our isolated clients connected. And the other thing that it's done is it's opened the door for us to think outside the box for our other community service projects. So we're already planning a community service project for 9/11 and for Veterans Day. So we're very excited. I think that sometimes we get really comfortable with just doing things the same way they've always been done. And having so much experience be a part of the group, I think going back to what Debs said about having purpose, the volunteers are even more, I feel, more engaged now than they were before, because they have a say in the new direction that the program is taking, and we're reinventing or redefining what a senior companion does and finding new ways of keeping people connected. So it's very exciting. I think it's going to create some changes that we are going to just hang on to because they've been so successful.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Suzette, and really to all of you for being here with me today. It's so important and inspirational, really, when you share these practical ideas and ways that people are using these ideas to feel more connected than ever in some ways. And I think that's even without technology, there are really ways all of us can be creative and do that. And it's really important now more than ever. So thank you all for joining me for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Next up, it's time for our health, aging, and wellness tip of the week. And joining us once again, here's Marty.
Hi, my name is Marty. I have another tip for you today. That is the question, why are we so darn resistant to something like exercise that is so good for us? So just a minute about your mental attitude, because really, why do humans act like this? We act like exercise is punishment for us. It brings out the procrastinator in us. We plan to start tomorrow or next week. We tend to have a quick fix mentality, which can lead to very unrealistic expectations. We expect overnight results. And we're not always comfortable with choices for healthy self-care. So we can come up with a lot of roadblocks. So it's really important to think about ways you can change up your mental approach. Listen to your own self-talk. Listen to the messages you give yourself. And, see how honest they are, how realistic they are. It's really that muscle between your ears is probably the most important muscle that you're working with. It's going to keep you from being successful or not. So sometimes people ask me, well, what exercise program should I do? And it really, the real important answer for you to hear is whatever you are actually going to do. That's what you should do. Avoid setting yourself up for failure, like signing up for like a morning aerobic class when you hate everything about morning aerobic classes. You know, sleep in and take a walk at sunset. So just really start exactly where you are. Pick something you think you might like, you know, like a group class or activity, or maybe learning how to play pickleball or golf. Make sure you get proper equipment for yourself to be safe and successful. Give it some time, like a couple months, and consider moving your body anytime you can remember to move. You know, stretch, breathe, walk, move. And as you start to do something and keep it up, give yourself constant rewards and kudos. Remind yourself of the benefits and label yourself an exerciser instead of a couch potato. As always, be nice to yourself and have fun.
Thank you, Marty. I miss seeing your face, and I love having you join us with these helpful tips. On our next segment, I welcome back Mark Clark, the CEO of Pima Council on Aging. Mark, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here.
You know, I was thinking about with what we have going on in the community now. You and I talked a month ago on the show about the things that PCOA was doing to help keep our staff and our clients safe and change our services around with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the last month, our cases have really skyrocketed. And I know we're taking some longer term approaches now that it's become clear this isn't something we're going to work through really quickly. Can you tell us what's been going on now and what you're planning for the future?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, Lisa, as you know, we made a decision that we would go ahead and advise staff here at PCOA that we were expecting to not be changing our method of operation significantly prior to 2021, at least until the beginning of the year. And you know, just in the last week or so, I've started seeing a number of other organizations and institutions in the community moving in that direction as well. Just yesterday, I got an email from my friends at the Fox Theater, and I think they're thinking they're going to be dark for the rest of this calendar year. And so I think what we're seeing is a broad realization that this is not simply a couple of week issue or maybe even a couple of month issue. I've certainly even seen elected officials begin to talk about, well, when the governor did this, we thought it would only be for this brief period of time, and clearly that's changed. So just beginning to think about what does it mean for us to operate in this mode for 6-7 months at least, and my guess is probably a little longer than that. You know, we canceled our gala, which we would normally do in April next year, and earlier we were scheduled to host a statewide aging conference in September. We canceled that months ago, but and we've put that off really until next September, with the hope that we'll be able to do it then. So just doing that has caused us to think differently, given us the opportunity to begin to think differently. So we're now launching some expanded community conversations about how to combat social isolation as a major concern, beginning to try to think more intentionally about how we serve folks, especially who don't have access to internet and or at least high-speed access, for whom watching videos may not be the easiest thing for them to do. And so how do we deal with that? So those are issues that we're beginning to try to come to terms with. We don't have those answers right in front of us, but that's the kind of stuff we're going to be focusing on over the course of the next couple of months as we look at this long-term situation.
I know that's something that I've had conversations about with all of the program areas that I work with is if you knew you were going to be operating in this way for 6 months to 12 months, what would you start doing differently? You know, did we put something in place that was just a stopgap measure that maybe we need to take a step back and relook at, so that we're actually providing, the absolute best, most efficient services we can going forward for a long time in this space. What do you see being some of the biggest challenges facing those of us working in the aging space in the current health crisis, and even just those of us with older adults in our lives that we love and care about?
Well, I think probably the one that's on my mind most these days is the whole issue of advocacy, and how do we advocate, especially at a time where there are voices that are really saying things that sound to me, and I think some of our colleagues, like very ageist and ableist kind of things. For instance, the old somebody may have to be sacrificed in order for the economy to come back. Those sort of issues really not appropriate. The reality is, I think we're seeing that what's best for an 80-year-old probably is best for an 18-year-old. And so getting into these zero-sum games, and I may have even talked about this a month ago, where we come from a place of fear that says there isn't enough for everybody to live a safe and healthy life, and therefore some people are just going to have to be sacrificed. That bad take one for the team kind of joking response some people have engaged in. So really, that's just not the reality. The reality is that our great society, flawed though it may be, has enough resources really to care for everybody. The question is, are we willing to make the difficult decisions about how to allocate those resources so that everybody can be healthy and safe in their life? And those continue to be major issues, especially as this virus is ramped up. Some elected officials are now talking about the fact that 99% of the people won't have a bad health outcome from if they get infected, and yet that I don't believe the research actually bears that out. Certainly here in Arizona, I think we're seeing a situation where the group of under 44-year-olds is the fastest growing, or the fastest growing group of folks that are being infected. But the reality, and while those folks may not have as negative a health outcome as somebody like me who's older or maybe has a underlying health condition, those younger people still will transmit the virus to other people. And so the more virus that we have floating around in the community, the more bad health outcomes we're going to have across the generations and the ages. So the notion that because somebody is older or has a disabling condition and therefore ought to be is less valuable is just not a situation that we think is good, and that we will continue to oppose those sort of attitudes.
Well, we're really lucky to have you have you speaking up as a champion on those issues right now, Mark, both as staff of this organization and as members of this community, and on behalf of all the older adults and people with disabilities and their loved ones. Thank you for taking such a strong position on that.
Well, you're very kind. Thanks a lot.
On a totally separate note for a minute, I was just looking at the forecast for the next week, and I see our temperatures up and approaching 110 for several days in a row, and which always worries me for people's health. What do you have any things that folks should know, older adults or folks that love them should know about keeping older adults safe during this really oppressive heat right now?
Well, I think, staying out of the direct sunlight, so staying in the shade, staying covered up, if possible, are really important issues. Staying hydrated, drinking a lot of fluids. That whole dehydration issue is such a negative health producer, I guess, a producer of bad health outcomes, being dehydrated. Our friends at the National Institute on Aging, the Federal National Institute on Aging, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, have put out some useful tips on both exercising in the heat and just being in hot weather safely. And so I would encourage everybody who can and is interested in this topic to go to www.nih.gov. So that's NIA, the National Institutes of Aging, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health.gov. And on their website, search on hot weather, and it'll take you right to those pages. So stay cool, stay safe, and have a great time. But this weekend especially, as we're looking at those, as you said, record heats, this is a good time to be mindful of not getting dehydrated and getting sick.
Super important, Mark. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining us on another episode of PCOA Voices. I love having you here, and hopefully within the next episode or two, we'll have you back.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Yeah. And now we present another caregiver tip of the week. And as we did in the last episode, episode 2, we'll once again be joined by Rebecca, Yadira, and Guillermo with more practical tips. So let's see what they have for us today.
Your helpful tip of the day for staying safe at home. We spent time recently with my parents, hanging out and playing games. The kids and I noticed that their normally very involved grandpa was keeping to himself and a bit agitated. My mom mentioned that he had been like that since his arthritis had worsened and he can't use his hands as well as he used to. How can we help?
One of the things that we can use is to play card games. This is used as a card holder. Both Josefina and I are using this, and we're both playing games. She can't see my cards, but it's very helpful with someone who has issues with dexterity. The next item we have is a simple pen holder, pen gripper, sorry. This is made out of foam tubing. You simply put the pen inside it and it's easier to grip. You can use it to do crossword puzzles or take simple notes.
For those who like to draw, we have these silicone grip handles so that you can still use regular markers. There's some that also size for crayons or color pencils. You simply grip the pen or the marker easiest for you, whatever you like to grip it, and then you can still color, and it provides that extra grip. So this is great for people that like to color. And for family time, you can still feed yourself using these great utensils. They're adaptive devices that help also for people who have dexterity issues. It's just an easier hold, whichever way is more comfortable, and you can still enjoy a nice family dinner with folks and eat independently.
We hope this was helpful to you. If you'd like more information on any of these devices, you can find them all online, or you can certainly give us a call and we can give you a little bit of help.
Thank you once again to our team at PMA Care at Home for that super helpful information. Caring for a loved one is tough, no matter how you look at it, but it can be much easier with just a few helpful tools and tricks. So we'll keep sharing those with you every episode, so stay tuned for that. And call us here at PCOA in the meantime if you need help in caring for a loved one. The best place to call is our helpline at 790-7262. Well, that's it for another episode. Thank you for tuning in to PCOA Voices, and I'll see you again with another episode in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, I'd love to hear from you by email. You can reach me at voices@pcoa.org. You can answer your questions, connect you with helpful staff, or provide you with any useful information you may want. I'd also love to hear your comments about the show or your suggestions for future episodes of the show. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We can also add you to a mailing list at voices@pcoa.org if you'd like to receive notices when new episodes are ready for you to see. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks. And until then, be safe and let your voice be heard. Bye, everybody.